This evening, before I do the usual round of welcomes, I do want to say tēnā koe to our guest speaker this evening, the Reverend Ngira Simmonds, who is the missioner of Waikato. So, yeah. Kia ora, Ngira.
Tēnā koe. Kia ora, everybody.
It's wonderful to have Ngira with us. We're really grateful, Ngira, that you've given your evening over to being with us, and we know that some of your whānau from Tapu are involved in Dinsdale. We can't see Dinsdale, of course, but they are there, so they'll be waving.
Excellent.
So let's do our usual round of hellos. It's great to be back with you this week, and I'm going to start by saying good evening to Dinsdale. We'll give you a wave from this end, Dinsdale. Good to see you. Good evening to Tokoroa. Great to see you, Tokoroa. Good evening to Waihi. Hello, Waihi. Good to see you. Good evening to New Plymouth. Great to see you all there. And good evening to Morrinsville. Not sure if Morrinsville are with us, but we'll wave anyway. They hopefully will join us. And good evening, last but not least, to Taumaranui. Great to see you. And we do, of course, as we usually do, say good evening to hello to those groups that are doing LiFT at other times in the week. So it's hello to the group in Hamilton Cathedral, to New Plymouth, to Raglan, to Te Kuiti, to Kāwhia, to Hawara, and to Te Auraha. And just want to say as well to Vincent and Kath in Taranaki, get well soon. We send all our love and prayers to you and the family and hope you'll be better soon and back with us. So let's get started. Over the next 3 weeks, you're going to have different people sitting in front of you, talking to you. Nira is leading tonight's session. The sessions for the next 2 Tuesdays will be led by Stephen Black. And then I will be back after that. So I'm really grateful to Stephen for stepping in and taking the next 2 weeks. I've given him all the heavy doctrinal stuff to do. It wasn't an accident. It was an accident, sorry. It was an accident. It wasn't intended that way, but Stephen is more than qualified to do that. But I'm going to hand over now to Nira, who's going to take us through our session on living our Tikanga Rua life.
Tēnā tātou e huama, e mihi ana ake a koe te pihopa, e whakataukau nei I ahau, ki wainganui a tātou. This is the first time I've done this, so I'm a little bit freaked out and a little bit excited. It's very quiet, so the folks here in Hamilton, please laugh at the appropriate places. Otherwise, I'll feel like it's not going too well. As the Bishop said, we're experiencing some technical difficulties. I really hope we do get them fixed. I had kind of assumed you would all be able to see what's on my laptop, but we'll plug on for the meantime. Perhaps, Bishop, could I ask if you'd say a karakia for us?
Absolutely.
And then we'll continue.
Emmaus God, our companion on the road, as we journey together, draw us out of ourselves and into you. May your Spirit move upon all your disciples. May new vocations be uncovered and new meaning understood. May we break your bread together and usher your kingdom in, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Kia ora, tēnā koe. Tonight was a bit of I heard this phrase at a conference I was at a couple of weeks ago. It was a bit of a case of writing the blurb about what I'm going to talk about in haste and then regretting it a bit later. So I'm not 100% certain what's in your books, but I've done my best to stick to what I said I would teach tonight. I've called tonight's session, and failing the technology, I can email my PowerPoint to somebody to send out to everybody. I mean, we can do that anyway. Tonight, I've called this session The Song of My Childhood, being Tikanga Rua, Waikato, and then it's got brackets and Taranaki. I kind of explain why I put and Taranaki in brackets as we go through. But from the outset, what I'm going to talk about tonight is rooted in the land of Waikato, because that's the only context I can speak from. But there are other stories, there are other kōrero that go with being Māori in different places and the Tikanga Rua life of our church in different places. And I would encourage us all to continue to explore that. Our hopes for tonight, there's lots we could have talked about tonight actually. We could have talked about basic Te Reo Māori. I could have gone through some pronunciation tips with you, how to count to 10 and all those sorts of things. Some basic Māori theological perspectives, Tikanga Rua tips, where your local Māori parishes and all of those sorts of things. Or I could have taught you all how to sing an awesome himene. But what underpins all of that is a story of my people. And it's a really hard story for me to tell. And sometimes when I've told this story, I cry. Don't worry, I'm okay with crying. But at the end of the day, as the prayer book says, what has been done, and what's next is the important part. Tonight I want to offer to you an understanding of a Māori perspective on our history. I hope that we'll also understand the complex nature of relationship between what I call te hahi mihinare, which is the Māori word for Anglican, but it actually means missionary. Te hahi mihinare gained its name because we were the missionary church, and in many ways we still are. But what the relationship between te hahi mihinare and tainui iwi. And then another hope is that we begin to forge new pathways forward, understanding past hurt and recognising how together we can shape the what's next. At this point, I might need some advice. How do we facilitate discussions? Do we just do that in each?
Yeah, so when you want to break into discussion, we invite everybody to go into their local groups.
Excellent.
And then we mute our button.
Right, so you don't all hear.
That's right, yeah. And then we have some time in groups.
Ka pai. Briefly, and should we say, my time is 7:42, so should we say to 7:50, what's that, 8 minutes? Just discuss in your groups what you thought about the article that I asked to be read and the documentary that you saw, and in particular noting what may have been new for you, if there was anything new that you weren't aware of, anything new for your learning. Ka pai? We'll see you all in 8 minutes. I think just to summarise the kōrero from this end, the majority of the comments, I think it would be fair to say is for most it was that the entire story was new. There was one really good report of it being taught at school, which was really good to hear. But the overwhelming feedback and my experience in general is that the stories of all the Māori wars, and in particular today I want to focus on the Battle of Rangiaowhia, but all of those stories in general are not told. They're not taught at school, and in my family, my grandfather, who went to Te Aute College, would be actively told not to talk about the Battle of Rangiaowhia when he was at school. This presentation is called The Song of My Childhood because the song of my childhood is called E Pāto Hau, which at the beginning of the YouTube documentary, you hear it chanted by Tom Rua, who spoke all throughout the documentary. The song of my childhood is not a translation of E Pāto Hau. If we can get the technology working, we'll see one. Oh, there we go. But E Pāto Hau is a lament, and I describe it as the song of my childhood because it was sung so many times as a child for me, so many times on my marae, that this song, this lament, shapes my identity. It speaks of who I am. It tells my story, my ancestors' story, the story of my people. It's embedded in the history of Waikato, of the Anglican Church, of Te Hāhi Mihinare, of the colonial army, and of the kingitanga. And I can relate to all of those things. So history is a very complex nature, and tonight one of the things that I want us to try and realise is it's just complex. And I would go as far to say as no one won the war. Governor Gray might have thought he won the war, but I don't think he did really. So anyway, some context. The Battle of Rangiaowhia is one of many wars in the Waikato, and that was alluded to in the documentary. My particular people of Raukawa, we were more involved in the Battle of Orako, which is a completely separate story, but the song, E Pāto Hau, is written about the Battle of Rangiaowhia. Rangiaowhia, as I'm sure many of you, if you weren't aware you are now, is near Te Awa Mutu. It was the home of the people of Ngāti Apakura, and that tribe almost doesn't exist anymore. There are people that still exist now. They normally call themselves Ngāti Maniapoto because that's how they became through marriage. But Ngāti Apakura, they were completely displaced. They moved south. They intermarried. But when they moved south, there was illness and plague, and most of them died out. There are still some around, and it's regaining its identity, but for the most part, that they were devastated. And it was a thriving area. Rangiaowhia was a thriving area. To quote James Cowan, he says, Rangiaowhia was a garden of fruit and root crops. On its slopes were groves of peaches, almonds, apples, quinces and cherries. Grapevines climbed the trees and the thatched raupo houses. Potatoes, kumara, maize, melons, pumpkins and vegetable marrows were grown plentifully. Good crops of wheat were grown on the northward sloping ground between the crest of Karaponia Hill, California Hill, and the groves of Orako and Kawakawa. In 1855, he says, the Waikato tribes produced 5,500 tonnes of wheat and 600 tonnes of potatoes, valued at £105,472. Most of it coming out of Rangiaowhia. It was the economic base of the Tainui people. And Governor Gray knew that he had to, in order to stop the growing Kingite movement, in order to stop the resistance, he had to take out Rangiaowhia. The food, the harakeke, all of the produce was shipped up the river and sold, and there are even stories within Māoridom of it going up the river to, I would imagine, Port Waikato or further to Auckland, and then being taken across to Australia and traded internationally. So Rangiaowhia was our kind of Wall Street It was the trade centre, perhaps not Wall Street, it was what informed Wall Street. It was the trade centre of Tainui. What's important is Māori aren't homogenous, so when I talk about Tainui, a better translation of iwi is nation, not so much tribe. It kind of is a tribe as well, but for example, we all celebrated 200 years of the gospel, 1814, Christmas Day not so long ago. Absolutely wonderful, great, but the people on the East Coast never got it till 1836, so as far as they're concerned, they'll celebrate it in 1836, because that's when it got down there. And here in the Waikato, it obviously didn't come at 1814, it came a little bit later. Still absolutely pivotal for our nation and the day we should celebrate, and we did it quite well, I think. But you can't assume that what happens in the north, what happened up there, is the same down here, and Tainui has its own identity. The words of the song, I'll read it through, I'm sure it'll be fine. I'll chant through the first couple of verses, and so you'll get a kind of an understanding of the sound of it, and then, hey, can you see it now?
Yeah, I can see it in Morrinsville.
That's just fabulous.
Well done, Stephen.
Blessed Stephen. Do I need to turn? How do I get this to go, Steve?
Switch on the left-hand side.
Is it?
Wow. Here we go. So this is again. I've just kind of talked through most of this, so I'll quickly run over it again. So here we go. The lament e pātohau. As I said, it's not a translation. It's the song of my childhood. Shapes my identity. Shapes who I am. Tells my story, my people's story. Really important. It speaks. This war kind of collects up the Waikato in terms of the Māori tribal region, our church, the army, and the kingitanga. It's a big connection of all of those things. It kind of explains some of the context, and what Rangiaowhia was, what happened there, those sorts of things. So here are the words to the song E Pātohau. It goes a little like this. E pātohau he weni raro, he homai aroha, kia tangi atu au I konei, he aroha ki te iwi, ka momotu ki tā whiti ki pā ae rau, ko wai e ki te atu, kei whea aku, hoa I muara, I te tōnuitanga, ka haramai te nei kata au e he, ka raunga iti aui. That's the first two verses. There are four more, but I won't sing the whole song. We're on a bit of a time limit tonight. But as you can, I think, kind of understand from the sound of the song, it's a sad song. The wind from the north touches me, bringing loving memories, so that I mourn in sorrow for my kin, lost to me in the world of spirits. Where are they now? Where are those friends of former days, who once lived in prosperity? The time of separation has come, leaving me desolate. O sky, pour down rain from above, while here below tears rain down from my eyes. O wano, sleep on at Mount Titiropinga, overlooking the land near our village that has been overturned. Here we are beyond the cliffs of the western Lake Taupo, stranded on the shore at Waihi, near my great ancestor Te Hiauhiau Tūkino, lying at his tomb on Mount Tongariro. I dream of returning to the hot springs so famous at Tokanu, to the healing waters of my people for whom I weep. So this song, I mean, and you know, we just finished the 11th coronation celebrations of the Māori King, and I don't know how many times this song was sung during that week. And can I add how grateful I was that I could delay a week. This time last week, we had a bit of an impromptu memorial service for the late Te Atairangi Kahu, the Māori Queen who died on the 15th of August at 11 minutes past 6. And initially there wasn't going to be a service, but then I think at about Friday they told me there was, so I had to do a last minute change, and I was incredibly grateful. That was very good Tikanga Rua. So A plus for our bishop. Here, so this, I just wanted to offer a bit of perspective here. So, Wanoa, who is mentioned in the song, who was a rangatira, wanted to be taken to the top of Titiropinga so he could look back to Rangiaowhia. He died before they got to the top. The jury's kind of out on who wrote this song. Some people say that there's kind of two main versions, but it's suggested that it was one of his cousins, whose name I've just forgotten. She wrote it at Titiropinga out of both her grief for the loss of Rangiaowhia, but also that the rangatira Wano didn't live to the top of the mountain to be able to look back to Rangiaowhia. And Ngāti Apakura, they came down to both Taupo, and then some more went the other way down towards Maniapoto, Te Kuiti, Taimara Nui, what we call either Te Rohe Pōtai or Te Nehe Nehe Nui. But these wars just shaped our identity as a people of Waikato, all of them, starting from Rangiriri, where the army and the troops marched down to Rangiaowhia, to Orako, across to Pukehinahina. The wars just, they changed everything about my people. And from our discussions earlier, one of the things that still hurts in our hearts is so many people don't know this story. And when we talk about Tikanga Rua relationships, we desperately need you to know this story. Above everything else, you know, you can have the best te reo Māori, you can be a fluent speaker of te reo Māori as a Pākehā person or as a non-Māori person. But what's more important than all of that, and I've given a similar presentation to this to a group of ordinands, I can't remember if it was early this year or last year, and my plea to them, and it's the same to you all tonight, is this story, these stories, and they're complex, and they make me cry, and they may make you cry, but it's everything that I am. It's everything that my people are. And there are other stories, and for those of you in Taranaki, you know, there's parihaka, and I said to Steve earlier today, when you get someone in to talk about parihaka, I want to come too, because I want to hear that story. And they are complex, and it is what it is, and I don't think you as Pākehā should feel guilty about this, and I'm not suggesting the slightest that happened. But we desperately need you to know that this happened. And I think more importantly, we need you to understand that sometimes the facts are different about the versions of the story. But just because a Pākehā with PhD in history wrote a book about it, It doesn't necessarily mean that my people's songs are wrong. They might not be the most accurate historically. But I've heard so many people talk about this. I vividly remember when I was at St John's College, the very first marae trip that we took, and Bishop Helen Ann had only been in the country for about a week, I think it was, and we were off, and we stayed at my marae near Putaruru. Might have even been less than a week. Only in the country a few days and thrusted right into all of this. And we went to Rangiawhia and we sat in the church there. And I listened to someone give a presentation. And all they tried to do was defend Bishop Selwyn. And I sat at the back of the church and I cried. I cried because the song that I just sang to you wasn't sung. I cried because in all of the awfulness of this story, all that person wanted to do was defend Selwyn. No mention of my people. No mention. And I mean, sure, by all means defend Selwyn, but there is so much more to the story than, Selwyn didn't intentionally tell them to seek refuge in the church. The suggestion was made that same day too that the church was accidentally set on fire. Well, okay. But, the point I want to make is there was no space in that moment. And it was only one moment, so we can't vest everything into that moment. But there was no space in that moment for the Māori perspective of what happened. And for my people, for all of Waikato, for all of Tainui, this was so life-changing, this was so intergenerational damage that we need to be able to tell our part of the story too. So as I said, this is what we need you to understand. This isn't taught in our schools. We're taught about Anzac, we're taught about World War I, we're taught about World War II or Vietnam or all those other things. And at the moment we're trying to, there's petitions put forward to try and get this taught in schools. Māori were taught to hide this story. It's the unspoken history. Its truth is denied, and the struggle remains today. And as I propose on the slide there, why is there a Von Tempsky Street but not a street dedicated to any Māori warriors in Hamilton? Why is there a Grey Street? And again, what's done is done. Change. A lot of people say, we need to change Von Tempsky Street. I really say, no, don't, because I'd get terribly confused, because everyone will talk about the new name and I'll go, we've just all come to accept it's Von Tempsky Street. That's fine. It's just, on the bigger picture scale, I don't want to sign a petition about removing Von Tempsky Street. Would just be mess. Google Maps couldn't cope. But the underlying question is, why did that happen, and why was the next neighbouring street not Rewi Maniapoto? And that speaks to our history. The facts of these wars. 2,000 to 3,000 soldiers, Tom Wana suggested in the documentary, sent to attack a village of 200 to 300, and particularly women and children, because Rangiawhia, it was agreed, would be, the war wouldn't go there. We were expecting it, as you saw in the documentary, at Pāterangi. And so they were all over there, and they came to Rangiawhia. They came to this place. And the Bishop Selwyn's diaries and some of the history suggests to us that Bishop Selwyn, I think this is on the next slide actually, yes, was present, and he tried to stop the war. And I think that is worth commending. It said that he advised the Māori women and children to shelter in the church because he thought that they would be safe there. And I think, knowing what I know or what I've read about Bishop Selwyn and heard about him, that could quite possibly, I think there's on the scale of probability, I would rate that quite high to the top. I think that's a pretty reliable source. Although when we were at koro nei hana last week, one of our senior queers in Tainui wanted to hit up Bishop Hallinan about, this rumour that Selwyn was the good man in the war. He certainly wasn't. But again, that's just their perspective. And surely you can understand why they would think that. The church was burnt, some say by accident. In the video that you watched, Tom suggests otherwise. And as he said, our history tells of a young girl who attempted to flee the burning church and was shot by the soldiers. So the options were burn alive or be shot. Now, I've heard and read articles that constantly debate whether or not this happened. Some suggest, the girl, Tom, I think in the video says she was about 13. It's 13, 113, it doesn't really matter. That for us, the underlying issue is we need this, and I think we need your help to get the rest of the country to look at our history, to not blame anyone because it is complex, but in order for us to move forward as a whole nation, but just as Tikanga Rua, we need to understand. So anytime Māori come to meetings, anytime I come to a meeting, this is what I come with. Because it was just in my childhood, this song was always there. Every time I drive to Te Awamutu, I'm vividly aware of this. The 21st of February 1864 was a Sunday. And we were doing exactly what the Pākehā missioners told us that we should do, and the Māori missioners told us to do. Māori were at church. We were at church. I don't know if it was exactly at the time, they attacked at 10 o'clock when all Anglicans are at church, I'm not sure. But, I think it's quite a point made in Māoridom. You attacked on a Sunday? I mean, wasn't this supposed to be the Lord's Day? That we're all set aside to not do such things? Why couldn't you have waited a day or come a day earlier type, again, it's probably not the best thing to hang your coat on, but it's something that's quite really, really important for us. Something that we still try and grapple with is, wow, you came on a Sunday. There are stories at other wars of the soldiers receiving communion inside. This is a Rua Pika Pika story, inside of the church. And the Māori soldiers outside peering in, and they weren't allowed to receive communion, and then the next morning they went at it. But the Māori weren't allowed in to receive communion the night before the war. One of the questions that I ask, and I've called this being Tikanga Rua, what does that mean for Māori? I know your story. Why don't you know mine? That's a common question among Māoridom, and I think it's a fair question. It's a fair question for us to ask. I know the history of Pākehā wars overseas. I know things like I went to Dilworth School, and one of our principals' name was Arthur Pluggy. And those of you who know Anzac history will know there's a place near Anzac called Pluggy's Pa, because he left the school and went and joined the war and was involved at that point, and so they named a bit of a field after him there. It's called Pluggy's Pa. All of these things that I was taught at school, I was taught to know these things. And I don't ask that question as an attack on those of you here right now. I ask that question to simply say to you all that I need your help to make sure that my children and your children and your grandchildren will know these stories. Why? So they can cry with us. I don't expect Pākehā to fix this. I don't expect Māori to fix it. But it just helps if we cry together. So as we've alluded earlier, it's more than just these battles in Waikato. Taranaki has its own story that I can't tell, hence on the first slide, the brackets around and Taranaki. But all iwi have their own stories and their own histories that were just simply banned in our consciousness of all New Zealand. Everybody. Māori didn't talk about it, no one talked about it. And generations of Māori and Pākehā drove past Te Awa Mutu, drove through Te Awa Mutu and had no idea. No idea. You drive through Orako and the road goes through the ground at the Battle of the Pa site. The road goes right through it. No one had it. So many people drive through there, and this is what we need to change. We need to understand that these stories, they form our identity as Māori. This is the basis now of who we are. When we got back to Mai Marae after visiting Rangiaowhia, the day we went when I was on a marae trip, we got back there and he said in his family they live a long time. I think he said his father and his grandfather both got into their 90s. They live a long time. He said for him, basing on the dates, his grandfather could have been at the Battle of Rangiaowhia. So it's not that long ago. It's not that long ago. But regardless of the time, these stories, they form our identity, and it's just so important for us, for our relationship, for our Tikanga Rua life. We need you to understand these stories. We need you to understand our hurt. And not quite. I thought it was the next slide. Because understanding the past for us informs our future. One of our sayings in Māoridom is that face the world with your back to the future, because you can't predict the future, but face the past because you can learn from the past. I think there's an element of frustration amongst Māori now that we have to continue to re-educate non-Māori all the time. But we're bound in this together in the church. Tikanga Māori aren't going anywhere, and I hope you're not going anywhere too. And we all have a story to tell, and they are complex because our history is. But essentially, we're in this together. It's one of the reasons why every slide's got our harakeke cross on the back. Is my underlying image is this war is your war too. And we're both on the same side. I'm on the same side as you were. And we both have to come to grips with what this means. And here's what I mean. I want to spend quite a long time unpacking this. Here's what I mean about the complex nature of our past. So this was the 150th celebrations of the Battle of Rangiaowhia. These are screenshots from the video that you watched. So you'll see on the left-hand side there, both Bishop Ngarahu, the Māori bishop here in Manawa Te Wheke, and sitting next to him is Bishop Dennis Brown. And I'm not sure who the guy closest to us is. But one could argue that Bishop Rahu is a descendant of Bishop Selwyn, given Bishop Selwyn was the first and only bishop of all New Zealand. If we understand our, the historical episcopate, the apostolic succession that we as Anglicans believe, Ngarahu participates in that. He is a descendant of Selwyn. Yet he was still invited to participate in the celebrations. That's what I'm trying to get at about the complex nature. Ngarahu is Māori. Ngarahu is from Tainui. He's from Te Arawa. He could be viewed as the Māori side of this war, or as a bishop in our church. In many ways, Bishop Helenan is a descendant of Bishop Selwyn as well. But Ngarahu could also be seen as being on the bishop's side of this war. And on the other side here, you have the Māori soldier, who's a descendant of the army. If he was to go to war tomorrow, it'd be for the same crown that Governor Grey came and attacked us on. And the New Zealand Army is the biggest employer of Māori in the country. So this is incredibly complex. Who are you going to blame? You can't blame the soldiers, because now the soldiers are real Māori. Can't blame the church, because the church is Māori. You know, you blame Governor Gray. Well, you know, who's his successor? Not so long ago, it was Paul Reeves. Yeah, I was trying to think. I was going to say Willie Apiata, but not Willie. Who was the most, not Patsy, really, the one just before? Gosh, I can't remember his name. Jerry Mataparai. You know, who do we blame? I think the easiest answer is no one. We all have to wrestle with the complex nature of what happened. I myself, as a descendant of a woman who fought in the Battle of Ōrākau, the woman who said, if the men die, the women and children will die with them. At the Battle of Ōrākau, they ran out of bullets, so they started putting bits of potato in their gun to fire back. They ran out of water, so they started sucking the water out of potatoes at the Battle of Ōrākau. I'm a descendant of one of those queer. But as a priest, I participate in the ministry of our church. The Anglican Church in Waikato, in many parts of Waikato, based on the Battle of Rangiaowhia, is called Te Hāhi I Tukunai o Tātou Tupuna ki Te Ahi. The church that, what's the right Pākehā word? The church that destined our ancestors to the fire. And it refers to the burning of the church that sent our ancestors to the fire. And people still, when, you know, I was out a couple of, in March, I was out in Kāwhia at Oau Kiterangi, Maketu Marae in Kāwhia, not Maketu on the Bay of Plenty side, but it's Maketu in Kāwhia. I was at that marae and they meant to me as the church that burnt our ancestors. And I got up and said, yeah, but I'm the ancestor too. I'm both the church and the ancestor. So which side do I pick? I can't. And I've said this before, you know, my being Anglican and my being Māori are so interwoven together that it is impossible for me to separate. I cannot conceive of a world where I am not Anglican, and I cannot conceive of a world where I am not Māori. And that tension is hard at times, and this is a part of that tension. But the past informs our future, and we can learn from this. And I think that the healing of the past, the healing of this war, lies in the recognition of the complex nature of it. Māori in 2017, we might get some form of temporary comfort by blaming Pākehā, but it's quite obvious to tell. I'm Pākehā too. I'm not the darkest Māori. So I just keep coming back to that question of who you're going to blame. Who you're going to blame, because the nature of who we are now. But I think that in and of itself is the answer. That our harakeke cross, the weaving together of our people, the weaving together of the church, the weaving together of our identity as Aotearoa, as New Zealand, the weaving together of two people, the weaving together of tikanga in the church, that's the answer to the horrific history that we all have. Is that it's accepting that we're actually so inextricably linked now that we can't blame anybody. I can't blame Bishop Helen Ann for that war. I can't say to her, you, Pākehā Bishop, descendant of Selwyn, you know, the Bishop, as I've said to you many before, I can't say that to the Bishop of Waikato because she carries the name of my river. And Waikato was a person as well. Our history is the answer for our way forward, accepting that actually. And there's also all sorts of theological implications about being together in baptism, about being together in Christ, that we can explore here too. But our reality of where we are now, our reality of where, oh my goodness, it's at the time, I need to hurry up. Our reality of where we are in terms of a people is such that the answer to where we need to go is that wherever it is, as long as we do it together, then our past is informing our future. So, just to, I mean, I've made this point a lot, but just to say it one more time, why not? That this is a complex story, and there's no easy answer. But I think together we can start to make a way forward. The last time I gave this presentation, and it was by the same technology, I actually gave it in the same room, and there were people at the other end crying, and I felt a bit bad. But someone asked, well, what can we do? And I think, the simple answer is cry with us. Mourn the realities of our shared history. We're not looking to you all for answers or to make it better. I think probably the biggest thing Māori want is recognition. And to that end, I did a quick Google search, and the government has agreed that the 28th of October will be the day that we will remember the New Zealand Wars, and it starts this year at Ruapekapeka in the north. The 28th of October, because that's the same day of the signing of the Declaration of Independence in 1835. So that was all on the back of two Otorohanga students, Leah Bell and Waimarama Anderson, who mooted the idea of it and after they took a school trip to Ōrākau, and they put a petition together of 12,000 signatures. They presented it to Parliament. It was taken to Parliament by the kingitanga, by the Māori King's son. And last year at the King's Koroneihana, this day was announced at the King's 10th coronation celebrations. So I think that's a really, really big step forward. And I think, as we come to terms with where we're at, as we come to terms with our history, we can kind of begin to tell it a bit more, talk about the story, as I've got there, be proactive in learning our history, tell others. We need this story to be added to the curriculum, not taken away, because Anzac, World War I, World War II, all those other wars, they're a part of our history too. Māori went to those wars. Those are not, Pākehā wars that don't affect Māori. They're a part of our story as well. And all we're saying is we need these ones to be a part of our story as well. And I think for us here tonight, understand that we still lament these wars, these days gone by, in a very real and painful way. And I think you might have seen that in the video. So the queer, the old ladies, they were still crying. The same marae trip, I remember Ngahinu Tricklebank, who was a priest in the South Island who's passed away now. We went to Pukehinahina in Tauranga, and as we walked up onto the battle site, she just burst into tears. It was the first time that she had been there, and she just absolutely cried. Same reaction when we went to Tarori's grave. I'm sure many of you have been there as well. She just wept because our history and our way of understanding our whole being in Waikato, anybody who whakapapas to Tainui, these wars affected all of us. Although it came down kind of one part of the tribe, came down one part of the island, everybody came in. And actually for the Battle of Ōrākau, people came as far as Tūhoi, as the east coast because by that point we knew the war was coming. They came, and Orako is known as Rewi's last stand. And there's a movie about that too. And that was a united front. And at the other battles too, there were other iwi as well. But Orako was quite a strong cross iwi stand. So these wars have a very big impact on Waikato. They also have a big impact on the rest of the country. Another one that particularly has quite a big impact on the Anglican Church is the Battle of Wairingahika near Gisborne. That one has, so the local tribe there, as a part of their treaty settlement, actually sought an official apology from the Bishop of Aotearoa as a part of their treaty settlement, and Archbishop Brown went and apologised on behalf of the church. Google can give you lots of answers to that rather than talk about it now. So this is our last thing. I'd hope to finish at 1:45. We might be 5 minutes late. I'm sorry, Bishop. But again, if we could just, in our groups, some things to talk about. So what did you learn tonight? I think for me, the more important question is, how will that shape your ministry? How can you help? Who can you tell about this story? And then perhaps for those further away, what's your local story? And how can we all learn a bit more about that local story? So if we spend 8:40, if we say just a little bit over 5 minutes having a quick chat, and then we'll wrap up and I'll hand it back to the Bishop. Kia ora, everybody. Kia ora, everybody. Thank you all. I think the last thing I'd like to say is that I changed the byline. So at the beginning, on the first slide, it said the song of my childhood, Tikanga Rua, Waikato, brackets, and Taranaki. And I changed it now to the song of my childhood, a weaving of church, iwi, and Tikanga Rua life. Because this for me, I think, is a beautiful example of how it all comes together. And it is, I wouldn't, make it the poster story of the Anglican Church, but this is where we begin a shared whakapapa. This is where we begin a shared genealogy together. That the church, our church, Te Hahi Mihinare, you're all Mihinare, you're all a part of the missionary church that Māori claim. We fervently claim ownership to it. This was always a Māori church, and you are a part of the Māori church now, and I'm a part of the Pākehā church, and we're all a part of the Pacific church. It's a claiming to that, and this story, these Waikato wars are particularly good in linking together through pain, but nonetheless linking together our church and iwi, and I think it provides a way in which we can look to each other. If Te Manawao Te Wheke and the Diocese of Waikato and Taranaki, if we look at ourselves as actually so inextricably linked with pain and joy and sorrow and love and goodness, then there is no way of moving forward without each other. I said at the clergy kura at our ministry school in Taranaki this year at maybe girls or boys? New Plymouth. Yes. The bishop's hoping that we're not Napier, otherwise her diocese just doubled. New Plymouth, I said there that the Bishop of Waikato and the Bishop of Taranaki, and indeed the Bishop of Waiapu, will always have something that the Bishop of Auckland, Wellington, Nelson, Christchurch and Dunedin won't have. And I say that with the greatest of respect to them. But that Waikato, Taranaki and Waiapu will forever have an ownership by Māori. And I've said to both Archbishop Philip and Bishop Helen before that if the diocese isn't serious about it, then change your name and be the Diocese of Hamilton and New Plymouth. But time and time again, I'm utterly overwhelmed with a great sense of joy and love at both Bishop Helen's and Archbishop Philip's commitment, and everybody's commitment here. You know, sometimes I'm at the cathedral more than I'm at my own parish church, but you know, it's there. And I mean, obviously, you're tikanga Pākehā, and you need to be. I don't want you to be tikanga Māori. Otherwise, you know, and when I come to the cathedral, I mean, I love the choir, I love the organ, I love all of those things. I love it. I absolutely love it. But there is a little place there that's for us. You know, there's a window dedicated to Archdeacon Hori Raiti. And you know, when I was the curate, Dean Yan designed the window, and we're in the window. There's a kowhai tree, and there's a little weta down the bottom. And it only needs to be little things. Because fundamentally, you remain a Pākehā diocese and a Pākehā church. So, you know, we don't use these terms in the church, but your core business is being Pākehā, and it should be. And don't be ashamed to do that. Because you know, my core business at Hemi Tapu is Māori, and I'm not going to be ashamed to do that. But there is a little bit where we just acknowledge each other. And on Saturday, Bishop Helen and I sat for it was about 4 hours in a very uncomfortable pew at Tūranga Waiwai Marae, and Bishop Helen was the only bishop there on the tangata whenua side to receive the bringing of the memory of the late Archbishop Brown Tudei, who was a part of the coronation of King Tuheitia. And she was there to receive that. And it's little things like that. It's little things like, well, it wasn't a little thing, the 100+ people that turned up this year at Hemi Tapu, we couldn't cope. There were so many people. It's little things like every time you sing the Lord's Prayer. Little things like when we've been to Evensong at the cathedral, and the choir at the cathedral have sung the song of this Magnificat in Te Reo Māori. All of those little things, that's all it takes. You know, every time the bishop opens her sermon with a small Māori greeting, that's all it is. It doesn't need to be big, because if it's big, you lose your Pākehā identity. And you can't, it wouldn't be an honest relationship if I just expected you all to be Māori. That wouldn't be fair. And equally, you all can have the absolute expectation of me that I will know something about being Pākehā as well. Because that's equally as fair. Often you only hear it the other way around. Always Māori saying, you need to learn this, you need to learn this. Well, Māori need to learn some things too. We need to be sure that we're able to be at the table with you all, that we're able to join in this relationship with you all. I better stop talking, otherwise I'm really going to go over time. But thank you everybody. Thank you Bishop for inviting me to come. It's a great privilege and a great honour, and I'm utterly convinced that in terms of the church here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, that we are leading the way. I see so many signs of hope here in Hamilton, and I know they exist beyond as well. I'm just based here in Hamilton. Some of my best friends are up at the cathedral. I still recall my year there, and all the things that I learnt, and we're working together in ways that's not happening in the rest of our church, and we really are at the forefront of being Tikanga Rua. And I'm incredibly grateful, and I know the people of Te Manawa o Te Wheke and Te Piopotango Aotearoa are as well. And I thank you all and look forward to the journey ahead. Tēnā koe Bishop, tēnā tātou.
Thank you so much, Nira, for being with us and helping us make that weave together. I think it was really great that we got the PowerPoint working, but
Yes.
wonderful to have been reminded about the flax cross as well, that is that symbol of our being woven together. And one of the core themes behind LiFT is that deepening of community, that deepening of identity in Christ, and this has been a really important part of that. So thank you so much for the love and the care that you've put into crafting, for the stories that you've brought to us, and for you being you in our
Sure.
midst. We're so grateful. Thank you so much. Please take our love and our greetings to Hemi Tapu as always.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everybody. So next week, as I said, Stephen Black will be taking the session, and he will be here the week after that as well. So you should, if you don't have them tonight, you should have your booklets for the next, the final 4 sessions of this major block of teaching before we take a little break. Those booklets should be winging their way to you today. So you will be ready to go next week. Thank you all very much for your patience, your attendance this evening, as always. We usually do a hello and goodbye now. So
Excellent.
You can participate in that as well. So I'm going to start by saying thank you and good night to Dinsdale, who are the screen behind where we are. So we wave at them and they will wave at us. Thank you. Thank you and good night and goodbye to our friends in Tokoroa.
There's a lot of people there.
Yeah, there's a lot of people in Tokoroa, hi. Thank you and good night to our friends in Waihi.
There's a lot of people there.
Thank you and good night to New Plymouth. It's always good when you get to Thank you and good evening, good night to Morrinsville.
Hey, Kia ora, Sal.
And thank you and good night to our friends in Taumarunui.
Hey, I went to school there.
Oh, kia ora. And thank you and good evening to all those tuning in during the week. Hope you all have a great week, and I will see you soon. Good night, everybody.